The Valanthi Empire had ruled the stars for 12,000 years. Their territory stretched across 3 galactic arms. Their fleets numbered in the millions. Their conquered species numbered in the hundreds. Every world that saw their ships in orbit had only 2 choices: kneel or die. Admiral Keth Sor stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, and looked out at the stars with the pride of a being who had never known defeat. His scales were dark blue, almost black, and his 4 eyes reflected the light of distant suns. He had served the Empire for 200 years. He had crushed rebellions on 50 worlds. He had never failed. Today was supposed to be a simple patrol mission along the border of the quarantine region. The region had a name that appeared on old star charts: Sol's Reach. Nobody went there. Nobody had gone there for thousands of years. The precursors, those ancient and mysterious beings who had vanished long ago, had placed warning beacons at every approach to this small section of space. The beacons all said the same thing: do not wake them. Keth Sor had always thought the warnings were foolish. The precursors were dead. Their civilization was dust. Whatever they had feared in Sol's Reach was probably dead too. The Empire's science had advanced far beyond anything the precursors had achieved. There was nothing in the galaxy that could threaten Valanthi power. His second-in-command, a younger officer named Veth Al, approached him with a data tablet in her clawed hands. Her scales were lighter than his, a sign of her youth, and her movements showed the nervous energy of someone delivering unexpected news. "Admiral, we have recovered the probe," she said. Keth Sor turned to look at her. "The one that drifted across the border?" "Yes, Admiral, but there is something strange. The probe was not damaged by whatever is in Sol's Reach. It was returned to us." This caught his attention. "Returned?" "It appears so, and there was something attached to it. Our science teams are examining it now." Keth Sor followed her to the science bay. The probe sat on a metal table, surrounded by technicians who moved their scanning equipment over every surface. But it was not the probe that caught Keth Sor's eye. It was the object attached to it, a golden disc about the size of his palm, covered in strange markings, lines and symbols that meant nothing to him. Images of creatures he had never seen, 2-legged beings with soft skin and flat faces. "What is this?" he asked. And the lead scientist, an elderly female named Korath, stepped forward. "We believe it is a message, Admiral. A very old one. The disc contains audio recordings and visual information. It appears to be some kind of greeting." "A greeting? From whom?" Korath touched a control and the disc began to play. Strange sounds filled the room: music, voices, something that might have been language. Then images appeared on the screen: landscapes of a blue and green world, structures made of stone and metal, and everywhere those same 2-legged creatures with their strange, soft bodies. "They call themselves humans," Korath said. "According to the data on this disk, they come from a planet called Earth, in a solar system at the center of Sol's Reach." Keth Sor studied the images. The humans looked weak. They had no claws, no scales, and no natural weapons of any kind. Their technology, at least in the images on the disk, was primitive. They had barely achieved spaceflight when this message was created. "This disk is old," he said. It was not a question. "Very old, Admiral. Several thousand years at least." "Then these humans may have advanced since then, or they may be extinct." Keth Sor made his decision quickly, as he always did. "We will send a reconnaissance fleet into Sol's Reach. 40 ships should be enough to assess the situation. If these humans still exist and have any value, we will prepare them for conquest. If they are worthless, we will note their location and move on." Veth Al stepped closer, her voice low. "Admiral, the precursor warnings." "The precursors are dead," Keth Sor interrupted. "Their warnings mean nothing. The Empire does not hide from shadows and old stories. Prepare the reconnaissance fleet." The 40 ships crossed the border 3 days later. Keth Sor remained on the Eternal Dominion, which stayed just outside Sol's Reach to maintain communication with Imperial Command. The reconnaissance fleet was led by Captain Drethvor, a competent officer who had served under Keth Sor for decades. The first reports came back within hours. The fleet had encountered no resistance at the border. They had found several small settlements on outer worlds, research stations and mining operations. From what they could tell, The technology they observed was curious, more advanced than expected, but still clearly inferior to Valanthe standards. Continue to the central system, Kethsor ordered. Find this Earth, assess its defenses. Understood. Our Admiral, Drethvor replied through the communication link. That was the last message Kethsor received from him. For 3 days there was nothing. No signals, no distress calls, no data transmissions. The 40 ships had simply gone silent. Kethsor sent probe after probe into Sol's Reach, but none returned with useful information. On the 4th day, a single transmission broke through the silence. It was not from Drethvor. The voice that came through the communication system was strange, softer than Valanthe speech, with unusual sounds and rhythms. But it spoke in galactic standard, the common language of the Empire's conquered territories. This is Commander Sarah Chen of the United Earth Defense Force. Your ships entered our territory without permission. They ignored our warnings to turn back. They refused our offers to negotiate. They fired on our vessels. Kethsor's claws tightened on the arms of his command chair. Your ships have been destroyed, the voice continued. Your crews have been taken prisoner. They will be treated according to the standards of civilized warfare, which is more than your empire has ever offered to others. The voice paused, and when it spoke again, there was something in it that Kethsor could not quite identify. Something cold. You were warned. The beacons told you not to come here. You ignored them. This is your one courtesy, your one chance to avoid what comes next. Leave this region. Do not return. Do not send more ships. Do not attempt to contact us again. Another pause. We have studied your empire. We know what you do to the species you conquer. We know about the slave worlds and the death camps and the extermination programs. We have decided that we want nothing to do with you. Stay away from us, and we will stay away from you. But if you come here again with warships and weapons, if you force us to defend ourselves a second time, the voice hardened, then you will learn why the precursors told you to let us sleep. The transmission ended. Kethsor sat in his command chair for a long moment, processing what he had heard. 40 ships destroyed. His entire reconnaissance fleet wiped out by a species that had been sending golden discs into space like children, throwing messages in bottles. It was impossible. It was also clearly true. He opened a channel to Imperial High Command. The face of High Archon Velith herself appeared on his screen. A rare honor. Were you in a sign of how seriously the Empire was taking this situation? She was ancient. Her scales faded to pale gray, but her 4 eyes still burned with the cold fire of absolute power. Admiral Kethsor, she said, report. He told her everything. The disc, the reconnaissance mission, the silence, the transmission. He did not try to hide his failure or make excuses. The High Archon had no patience for such things. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. These humans, she said finally, they destroyed 40 of our ships? Yes, High Archon. And they claim they could do worse? That was their implication, High Archon. Velith's eyes narrowed. The precursors warned us about this region. I remember learning about those warnings when I was young. Everyone assumed they were relics of a more superstitious age. Perhaps we were wrong. Kethsor felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps the High Archon would decide to heed the warning after all. Perhaps she would order him to withdraw, to leave Sol's Reach alone. That hope died with her next words. But the Valanthe Empire does not retreat from challenges. We do not accept insults. We do not allow lesser species to dictate terms to us. Her voice grew cold. If these humans want a war, we will give them one, and we will show them what happens to those who defy our power. What are your orders, High Archon? Remain at the border. I am dispatching the 3rd expansion fleet to your position. 800 ships, including 2 planet crackers. Admiral Drethon will take command when he arrives. Kethsor knew the name. Drethon was famous throughout the Empire. Famous for his brutality, his efficiency, and his complete lack of mercy. He had pacified a dozen rebellious worlds. He had overseen the extermination of 3 species that the Empire had deemed too troublesome to enslave. The 3rd expansion fleet, High Archon, is that not excessive? Velith smiled, and it was not a pleasant smile. These humans destroyed 40 of our ships. They humiliated us. When we are done with them, There will be nothing left of their world but ash and memory, and every species in the galaxy will know the price of defying the Valanthi Empire. The communication ended. Kethesor sat alone on his bridge, staring at the stars. Somewhere out there, beyond the invisible line of the border, the humans were waiting. They had won the first battle. They had sent their warning, but they had no idea what was coming. For he thought about the golden disk and its primitive images. He thought about the voice on the transmission, calm, controlled, but with that strange coldness underneath. He thought about the precursor warnings that everyone had ignored for thousands of years. Do not wake them. For the first time in his long career, Admiral Kethesor felt something he had not felt in centuries. He felt afraid. Not for himself. He had faced death many times and made peace with it long ago. But afraid for what might happen next. Afraid that the Empire, in its pride and arrogance, was about to make a terrible mistake. He pushed the feeling aside. He was a soldier. He followed orders. It was not his place to question the decisions of the High Archon. But late that night, alone in his quarters, he pulled up the recording of the human transmission and listened to it again. He studied the voice, trying to understand the beings who had spoken those words. "We have decided that we want nothing to do with you," the human had said. That was the part that bothered him most. Not the threat. He had heard many threats in his lifetime. But the tone of those words. The humans had not sounded angry. They had not sounded frightened. They had sounded tired. Like beings who had seen this situation before. Like beings who knew exactly how it would end. Like beings who were sorry for what they were about to do. Kethesor turned off the recording and stared at the ceiling of his quarters. The third expansion fleet would arrive in 2 weeks. 800 ships against one small system. It should be more than enough. It should be. But the precursors had been afraid of something in Sol's Reach. The precursors who had built wonders that the Empire still could not understand. The precursors who had vanished without a trace, leaving only their warnings behind. Do not wake them. Kethesor closed his eyes and tried to sleep. But sleep was a long time coming, and when it finally arrived, it was filled with dreams of fire and soft-skinned creatures who smiled sadly as they watched his world burn. The third expansion fleet was coming, and nothing would ever be the same again. Admiral Drethon arrived at the border of Sol's Reach with the confidence of a being who had never lost a battle. His flagship, the Wrath of Empire, was the largest vessel in the Valanthi fleet. A massive warship bristling with weapons that could crack planets and burn entire civilizations to ash. Behind it came 799 more ships, arranged in perfect formation, their engines filling space with the glow of unlimited power. He had studied the reports from Admiral Kethesor. 40 ships lost, a transmission from some human commander making threats. It was interesting, he admitted. A species that could destroy 40 Valanthi ships was not completely worthless. But 800 ships was a different matter entirely. Drethon had crushed rebellions with less. He had exterminated entire species with less. These humans, whatever tricks they had used against the reconnaissance fleet, would learn what it meant to face the full might of the Empire. Kethesor met him in the command chamber of the Wrath of Empire. The older admiral looked tired, Drethon noticed. There were shadows under his 4 eyes. Othran and his movements lacked their usual precision. "You seem troubled, Kethesor," Drethon said. "Do you doubt our mission?" "I do not doubt our strength," Kethesor replied carefully, "but I have listened to the human transmission many times. There is something about these beings that concerns me." "Concerns you how?" "They did not sound like a species facing annihilation. They sounded like a species that has seen war before. Many wars. They sounded like they knew exactly what would happen next." Drethon laughed. It was not a kind sound. "Of course they have seen war. Every species has seen war, but they have not seen our war. They have not faced Valanthi fire. By the time we are finished with them, their world will be glass and their species will be a memory." He dismissed Kethesor and turned to his tactical display. The third expansion fleet began its advance into Sol's Reach. They encountered no resistance at first. The human settlements on the outer worlds had been abandoned. No people, no ships, no defenses. It was as if the entire population had simply vanished. "They are running," one of his officers said, "fleeing to their homeworld." "Let them," Drethon replied. Let them gather in one place. It will make our work easier. The fleet moved deeper into human space. Days passed without contact. The silence began to bother some of the younger officers. But Drethon remained confident. He had seen this before. Inferior species hiding, hoping that their enemy would give up and leave. They never learned. The Empire never gave up. The Empire never left. On the seventh day, they reached Earth. It was a small world, Drethon noted. It's blue and green and white, covered in water and vegetation. From orbit, he could see the lights of cities on the night side. Millions of them. Billions of lives waiting to be extinguished or enslaved. The human defenses were laughable. A handful of orbital stations, easily destroyed. A few dozen ships, none larger than a light cruiser. Nothing that could stand against the Third Expansion Fleet. Drethon opened a communication channel on all frequencies. Standard Imperial protocol offers surrender before attack. Not because he cared about their answer, but because the recording would be broadcast to every conquered species in the Empire. Let them see what happened to those who defied Valanthi power. People of Earth, he said, I am Admiral Drethon of the Valanthi Empire. Your existence has come to our attention. Yin, and we have found you wanting. Your ships destroyed 40 of our vessels in an act of unprovoked aggression. This insult cannot go unanswered. He paused, letting the words sink in. You have two choices. Surrender unconditionally, and your people will become slaves of the Empire. You will work in our mines and factories. You will serve our needs, but you will live or resist, and we will turn your world to ash. Every city, every settlement, every trace of your civilization will be erased. You have 1 hour to decide. He closed the channel and waited. The response came in less than 5 minutes. A new face appeared on his screen. A human female with dark hair and tired eyes. She wore a simple uniform, gray and unadorned, and she looked at him with an expression he could not read. Admiral Drethon, she said, I am Secretary General Chen of the United Earth Government. I received your message. And your answer? Before I give it, I want to make sure you understand something. She leaned forward slightly. We did not attack your reconnaissance fleet. We warned them to leave. We told them very clearly that they were entering our territory and that we wanted to be left alone. They ignored us. They fired on our patrol ships. We defended ourselves. Drethon felt anger rising in his chest. You dare to lecture me about defense? You destroyed 40 Imperial ships. Yes, she said simply. We did. And we told your Admiral Kethsor exactly what would happen if you came back. We gave you a chance to walk away. We always give one chance. She paused and something changed in her expression. The tiredness was still there. But now there was something else underneath it. Something cold. It's important to us that we do, she continued, that we give that chance, that we try to avoid what comes next. Because we know what we are, Admiral. We know what we're capable of, and we don't like it. We spent a very long time learning to be better, learning to control ourselves, learning to choose peace instead of war. Her voice hardened. But we never forgot how to fight. And if you force us to, if you give us no other choice, then we will show you exactly why the precursors told the galaxy to let us sleep. Drethon laughed. Brave words from a species facing extinction? Your few ships cannot stop us. Your primitive weapons cannot harm us. In 1 hour I will give the order, and your world will burn. Secretary General Chen looked at him for a long moment, and then she sighed, a sound of infinite sadness. We're sorry for what comes next, she said. The communication ended. Drethon turned to his officers, ready to give orders for the attack. But before he could speak, alarms began screaming across the bridge. Admiral, his sensor officer shouted. Ships appearing all around us. Hundreds of them. They're coming out of nowhere. Drethon's eyes went wide as he looked at the tactical display. The human ships, those pitiful dozen vessels he had dismissed, were still there. But now they were surrounded by others. Ships appearing from behind asteroids, from inside gas clouds, from the shadows of moons. Ships that had been hidden, waiting, not dozens, thousands. That's impossible, someone whispered. But it was not impossible. It was real. The humans had built a fleet in secret, on a fleet that dwarfed even the Third Expansion Fleet. They had been waiting, not for rescue, not for escape, but for this moment. The human ships moved. Drethon had commanded fleets for over a century. He had fought in dozens of battles against countless species. He had seen every tactic, every strategy, every form of warfare the galaxy had to offer. He had never seen anything like this. The humans did not fight in formation. They did not form battle lines or follow predictable patterns. They attacked from every direction at once, their ships weaving between his vessels with impossible speed and precision. They targeted weapon systems and engines, crippling his ships without destroying them. And when his weapons finally found their targets, when Valanthi guns burned through human shields and hulls, the humans did something that froze Drethon's blood. They smiled. He could see them through intercepted transmissions, human faces on human bridges, working their weapons, fighting their ships, dying in flames. And they were smiling, laughing, making jokes as missiles tore through their armor, singing songs as their vessels came apart around them. One human captain, his ship crippled and burning, aimed his broken vessel at a Valanthi cruiser and accelerated. In the final seconds before impact, he broadcast one word across all frequencies: "Yeet!" The explosion took both ships. Drethon did not understand. He could not understand. Every species he had ever conquered had fought with desperation, with fear, with the frantic energy of creatures trying to survive. But the humans fought like something else entirely. They fought like beings who had already made peace with death, like beings who were not afraid of anything, like beings who were enjoying themselves. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the third expansion fleet no longer existed. 792 ships destroyed, 6 surrendered. 2 managed to escape across the border, the wrath of Empire among them, though barely. Drethon's flagship had lost half its weapons, most of its engines, and 3/4 of its crew. He sat in his command chair, surrounded by smoke and sparks and the groans of dying metal, and tried to understand what had happened. "Admiral," his communications officer said weakly, we are receiving a transmission." It was Secretary General Chen again. She looked exactly the same as before, calm, tired, sad, as if she had not just won an impossible victory. "Admiral Drethon," she said, "your fleet has been destroyed. Your surviving ships are free to leave. We will not pursue. We will not invade your territory. We will not seek revenge for your attack." She paused. "But this is your last warning. Tell your empire what happened here. Tell them that we want only to be left alone. Tell them that we have given them 2 chances now, and we will not give them a third." Her expression changed, just slightly. The sadness deepened. "We do not want to hurt anyone. We spent centuries learning to control our worst impulses, to choose peace, to be better than we were. But if your empire comes here again, if you force us to defend ourselves again, we will not stop at defense." She leaned forward. "We will come for you. We will find every ship, every station, every world that flies the imperial flag, and we will end the Valanthi Empire forever. Not because we want to, but because you will have left us no choice." The transmission ended. Drethon sat in silence as his crippled flagship limped toward the border. Around him, the survivors of his crew worked frantically to keep the ship alive. No one spoke of the battle. No one spoke of the dead. Behind them, in the space around Earth, the human ships gathered their own dead and began to return home. They had won a great victory. They had destroyed a fleet that should have conquered them easily. But there was no celebration, no triumph. Just quiet efficiency and that same tired sadness he had seen in Secretary General Chen's eyes. Drethon thought about what she had said. "We spent centuries learning to control our worst impulses." He thought about the way the humans had fought, the joy in their eyes, the laughter in their voices, the absolute fearlessness of beings who had accepted death and found it funny. He thought about the precursor warnings that everyone had ignored. Do not wake them. For the first time in his long career, Admiral Drethon understood what those words meant. The humans were not a threat because of their ships or their weapons or their technology. They were a threat because of what they were underneath all their efforts at civilization and peace. They were predators, the most dangerous predators the galaxy had ever produced. And they had spent thousands of years trying to become something else, something better, something that did not need to kill and destroy. But the Empire had woken them up. The Empire had reminded them of what they truly were. And now Drethon realized with cold certainty, nothing in the galaxy would ever be safe again. The wrath of Empire crossed the border and left Sol's Reach behind. Drethon looked back at the stars one last time, thinking about the blue-green world called Earth and the strange, terrible beings who lived there. He had lost. He had been humiliated. His career was over, his reputation destroyed. But as he turned away from the stars, he found himself hoping that High Archon Velith would listen to the warning. He found himself hoping that the Empire would accept its defeat and leave the humans alone. Because if they did not, if the Empire went back for revenge, Drethon knew exactly what would happen. The humans would come, and they would not stop, and they would not show mercy, and they would not rest until the last Valanthi ship was burning wreckage, and the last Valanthi world was silent and dark. He had seen the truth in their eyes, the terrible, wonderful, horrifying truth. The humans did not want to be monsters, but they were very, very good at it. High Archon Velith stood in the center of the Imperial War Chamber and felt something she had not felt in 500 years of absolute rule. She felt fear. The reports from the border lay spread across the holographic table before her. 800 ships sent to destroy one small system. 8 ships returned. The third expansion fleet, the pride of Imperial military power, wiped out in 6 hours by a species that had been sending golden discs into space like children making wishes. Around her stood the Council of Scales, the 12 most powerful beings in the Empire after herself. Military commanders, economic ministers, leaders of the great houses that had supported Valanthi rule for millennia. They had gathered to discuss the disaster, but no one seemed willing to speak first. Finally, Admiral Keth Sor broke the silence. He had survived the battle, though his ship had been damaged and his pride destroyed. He looked older now, Velith noticed, older and somehow smaller. "The humans fought like nothing I have ever seen," he said quietly. "They did not follow any doctrine we recognized. They attacked from all directions, used weapons we could not identify, employed tactics that seemed almost random but achieved devastating results. And they did not fear death, they laughed as they died." "Laughed," Minister Drethsol repeated. He was the Empire's chief economic advisor, a being who had never seen battle and did not understand it. "What do you mean, they laughed?" "I mean exactly what I said. They found their own deaths amusing. They made jokes as their ships exploded. They sang songs as they burned." Kethzer shook his head slowly. "I have fought many species in my career. I have seen courage and cowardice, desperation and despair. But I have never seen anything like this. The humans were not fighting to survive. They were fighting because they wanted to fight." Silence fell over the chamber again. High Archon Velith turned to her intelligence chief, a cold-blooded female named Koreth Val, who had spent her entire career gathering secrets and studying enemies. "What do we know about these humans? Where did they come from? Why did the precursors quarantine them?" Koreth Val stepped forward, her movements careful and precise. "I have spent the past 3 weeks searching every archive in the Empire, High Archon. I have questioned scholars, interrogated prisoners, and analyzed every piece of data we have ever collected about Sol's Reach. What I have found is disturbing." She activated a holographic display. Images appeared, ancient images, older than the Empire itself. Strange symbols and unfamiliar writing, recovered from precursor ruins scattered across the galaxy. "The precursors did not quarantine Sol's Reach because the humans were weak," Korethval said. "So sure they quarantined it because the humans were too strong." "Too strong?" Velith's eyes narrowed. "Explain." "The precursors encountered humanity approximately 15,000 years ago, when the humans had only recently achieved spaceflight. At that time, the humans were engaged in what they called a world war, a conflict that covered their entire planet and killed hundreds of millions of their own kind." She changed the display. New images appeared, images of destruction on a scale that made even the hardened military commanders flinch. Cities reduced to rubble, landscapes burned to ash, weapons that split atoms and poisoned the air for generations. "The humans did this to themselves," Korethval continued, "not once, but many times throughout their history. They are a species that has spent most of their existence fighting each other, and they have developed weapons of mass destruction, perfected the arts of torture and genocide, and invented new methods of killing faster than any other species we have ever studied. She paused, letting the implications sink in. But here is what truly frightened the precursors. When the humans realized what they were capable of, they tried to stop. They looked at their own history, saw the horror they had created, and decided they did not want to be that way anymore. They built international organizations to prevent war. They created laws against weapons of mass destruction. They taught their children about peace and cooperation. Velith frowned. If they wanted peace, why did they attack our ships? They did not want peace at any cost, High Archon. They wanted peace with dignity. They wanted to be left alone to work on themselves, accurate to become better than they were. The precursors understood this and offered them a deal. She displayed a new image, an ancient document written in a language the Empire's scholars had worked decades to decode. The humans would remain in Sol's reach. They would not expand beyond their borders. They would focus on internal development and self-improvement. In exchange, the precursors would place warning beacons around their territory. No one would disturb them. And if someone did disturb them, Velith asked. Karethval's expression grew even colder. Then the humans were free to defend themselves by any means necessary. The precursors called it the Sleeping Giant Protocol. The humans were the giant, a species of immense power and terrible potential, choosing to sleep rather than conquer. But if anyone woke them up, she did not need to finish the sentence. High Archon Velith stood in silence for a long moment, processing this information. The humans were not just another species to be conquered. They were something far more dangerous, a species that had chosen peace not because they were weak, but because they knew exactly how strong they were, and the Empire had forced them to remember. What else have you learned? She demanded. I have made contact with several species that encountered humans before the quarantine, Karethval said. Their stories are consistent. Every species that threatened humanity was destroyed. Not conquered, not enslaved, destroyed. The humans did not stop until their enemies were completely eliminated, and then they went back to their peaceful lives as if nothing had happened. She paused. There is one account that stands out. A species called the Krathvol attacked a human colony approximately 8,000 years ago. They were a warrior race much like us, powerful, aggressive, confident in their strength. The humans warned them to leave. The Krathvol refused. What happened? The Krathvol no longer exist. The humans hunted them across 3 star systems. They found every ship, every station, every settlement. They killed every adult and took the children to raise as their own. The entire species was erased from the galaxy in less than 2 years. The chamber was silent. And then, Karethval continued, the humans returned to Sol's Reach and went back to their quiet lives. They built schools and hospitals. They wrote poetry and made music. They raised families and grew old and died in peace, as if they had not just committed genocide against a species that threatened them. Admiral Kethsor spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. I captured a human officer during the battle, a woman named Commander Torres. Before she was rescued by her own forces, I had a chance to question her. And, Velith demanded, I asked her how they could be so brutal in war and so gentle in peace, how they could kill without mercy and then return home to lives of compassion and love. Kethsor met Velith's eyes. She said something I will never forget. He took a breath. She said, we know what we are. We're the monsters of our own history. We spent centuries trying to be better, and we got pretty good at it. But we never forgot the monster. We just learned when to let it out. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Boy, High Archon Velith felt the fear growing in her chest, spreading through her body like poison. She had ruled the Empire for 5 centuries. She had conquered 100 worlds and enslaved 100 species. She had never retreated, never surrendered, never shown weakness. But now she was facing something she had never faced before. An enemy that did not want to fight but could not be defeated if they chose to do so. What are our options? She asked finally. Minister Vethkor, the youngest member of the council, stepped forward. He was ambitious and clever, and his eyes gleamed with the light of someone who saw opportunity in disaster. "We could accept the human term," he said. "Leave them alone. Focus our expansion in other directions. While the galaxy is vast, there are countless worlds to conquer that do not involve antagonizing these humans." Several council members murmured in agreement. It was the safe choice, the sensible choice. But High Archon Veleth had not built the greatest empire in galactic history by being sensible. "No," she said. The murmuring stopped. "No," she repeated. "I will not let this insult stand. I will not let some primitive species dictate terms to the Volanthi Empire. We have ruled this galaxy for 12,000 years. We have crushed every enemy who ever stood against us. We will not be humiliated by creatures who were playing with pointed sticks while we were building starships." She turned to her military commanders. "Gather every fleet we have, strip the border defenses, recall the occupation forces, mobilize the reserves. And I want 50,000 ships at the border of Sol's Reach within 6 months." 50,000? Admiral Kethsor's voice was hollow with disbelief. "High Archon, the humans destroyed 800 ships with ease. If we send more, they will simply destroy more." "Then we will send enough that they cannot destroy them all," Veleth snapped. "We will overwhelm them with numbers. We will drown them in fire. And when their world is burning and their species is broken, the galaxy will know that no one defies the Volanthi Empire and lives." She looked around the chamber, daring anyone to challenge her. No one did. "This meeting is over," she said. "Prepare for war." The council members filed out, their faces carefully neutral. But Veleth could see the doubt in their eyes, the fear they were trying to hide. They thought she was making a mistake. Or they thought she was leading the Empire to destruction. Perhaps they were right. But High Archon Veleth had not become High Archon by listening to doubts. She had become High Archon by crushing anyone who opposed her, by never showing weakness, by always striking back harder than she was struck. The humans had humiliated her empire. They had destroyed her fleet. They had made her look weak in front of the entire galaxy. She would make them pay. She would make them burn. And if the galaxy had to burn with them, so be it. Alone in the war chamber, surrounded by the ghosts of her ancestors and the weight of 12,000 years of imperial history, High Archon Veleth began planning the largest military operation in galactic history. She did not know, could not know, that in the quiet reaches of Sol's Reach, the humans were watching. Their sensors tracked every ship the Empire moved. Their analysts studied every communication the Empire sent. Their war councils met in secret chambers beneath the surface of Earth, discussing strategies and building weapons and preparing for the storm they knew was coming. They had hoped, truly, genuinely hoped, that the warning would be enough, that the destruction of the Third Expansion Fleet would convince the Empire to leave them alone. But they had known, even as they hoped, that it probably would not. Secretary General Chen stood before the United Earth Defense Council and delivered the news that everyone had been expecting. "The Empire is mobilizing," she said. "Our projections suggest they will attack within 6 to 8 months with a force of approximately 50,000 ships." The council members absorbed this information in silence. 50,000 ships, the largest fleet the galaxy had ever seen. "Can we defeat them?" someone asked. Chen looked at the person who had spoken. Admiral Rodriguez, commander of the Earth Defense Fleet. He was an old man, his hair gray and his face lined with the weight of decades of service. He had fought in the battle that destroyed the Third Expansion Fleet. He had seen what humans could do when they had no choice. "Yes," she said simply, "we can defeat them." "But," Rodriguez prompted. Chen sighed. "But defeating them here, in our space, will not be enough. They will just come back with more ships. And more. And more. Oh, until they run out of ships or we run out of people." She turned to face the full council. "If we want this war to end, truly end, we cannot simply defend ourselves. We have to take the fight to them. We have to destroy their ability to threaten us ever again." Silence. "You're talking about invading the Empire," one of the council members said. "Yes," Chen replied, "I am. But that's exactly what we've spent centuries trying to avoid. That's why we stayed in quarantine, so we wouldn't become conquerors, so we wouldn't become them." "I know," Chen said quietly, "and I am sorry, but they have given us no choice." She thought about the precursor deal, the agreement that had kept humanity safe and contained for thousands of years. She thought about the generations of humans who had worked so hard to be better, to control their worst impulses, to choose peace. All of that work, all of that sacrifice was about to be undone, because the Empire had ignored the warnings, because the Empire had woken the sleeping giant, and now nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same again. "Begin mobilization," Secretary General Chen ordered. "Full war footing, everything we have." She looked out the window at the blue sky of Earth, at the world she had sworn to protect. "We gave them every chance," she said softly. "We tried so hard." She closed her eyes. "God forgive us for what we're about to do." The war began on a Tuesday. Admiral Rodriguez had always thought it was strange that such an ordinary day would mark the beginning of the end of the largest empire in galactic history. But wars, he had learned, did not care about symbolism. They came when they came. When you either met them or you died. The Imperial fleet arrived at the border of Sol's Reach exactly 6 months after High Archon Velith had given her orders. 52,000 ships, arranged in formations that stretched across light years of space. The largest military force ever assembled in galactic history, carrying enough firepower to burn 100 worlds to ash. Admiral Rodriguez watched them on the tactical display from the bridge of his flagship, the UES Perseverance. His own fleet was smaller, only 15,000 ships, but they had advantages the Empire could not imagine. "All ships report ready," his first officer announced. Rodriguez nodded. "Begin Operation Homecoming." The human ships did not wait for the Empire to attack. They moved first, striking from positions the Imperial sensors had not detected. So hidden bases in the outer system, stealth ships that had been drifting silently for weeks, automated weapon platforms that activated on command and filled space with death. The first Imperial ships died before they even knew they were under attack. But the Empire had learned from its previous defeat. Their commanders had studied the human tactics, developed countermeasures, trained their crews to expect the unexpected. The initial losses were heavy, but the Imperial fleet did not break. It pushed forward, absorbing casualties, closing the distance to Earth. For 3 weeks, the battle raged across the solar system. Ships died by the hundreds on both sides. Space was filled with wreckage and corpses and the screams of the dying. The humans fought with everything they had, every ship, every weapon, every ounce of courage and cunning they possessed. But the numbers were against them. On the 20th day, the Imperial fleet broke through the final defensive line. Earth lay before them, unprotected. High Archon Velith, watching from her flagship at the rear of the formation, allowed herself a moment of triumph. "Send the order," she commanded. "Begin bombardment. Burn that world to ashes." But before the order could be executed, something happened. New contacts appeared on every sensor array in the Imperial fleet. Not dozens, not hundreds, thousands. Human ships emerged from hidden shipyards throughout the solar system. Ships that had been held in reserve, waiting for this moment. Fresh ships with full ammunition and rested crews, throwing themselves into battle against an enemy that had been fighting for weeks. And they were not alone. Ships of other designs appeared alongside them. Ships that bore the markings of species the Empire had conquered generations ago. The Vorth, with their crystalline vessels. The Kenari, with their living ships that swam through space like great beasts. The Teloth, the Yenari, the Drethkai, a dozen species that had been enslaved by the Empire, now flying alongside the humans. Admiral Kethsor, watching from his position near the High Archon's flagship, felt his heart freeze in his chest. "Where did they come from?" he whispered. The answer came through intercepted communications. While the main human fleet had been fighting in Sol's Reach, other human ships had been very busy. They had slipped past the depleted Imperial border defenses. They had visited the slave worlds and the conquered territories. They had delivered a simple message to every oppressed species in the Empire. "Fight with us, and we will free you. Stay neutral, and we will free you anyway. Fight against us, and we will still free you, but it will take longer." The conquered species had made their choice. High Archon Velith watched her tactical display fill with enemy markers and felt something she had never felt before in her 5 centuries of rule. She felt defeat. The combined human and allied fleet swept through the Imperial formation like fire through dry grass. Ships that had been fighting for weeks, Crews that were exhausted and demoralized found themselves facing fresh enemies with everything to fight for. The Imperial fleet broke. It did not retreat in good order. It did not make a strategic withdrawal. It broke, ships scattering in every direction. Horde crews abandoning their posts, commanders fleeing for their lives. The greatest military force in galactic history dissolved into chaos in less than 12 hours. High Archon Velith's flagship escaped. Barely. She made it across the border with a handful of other ships, leaving the wreckage of her dreams burning in the darkness behind her. But the humans did not stop at the border. They followed. In the weeks that came after, the galaxy learned what it truly meant to fight humanity. The humans did not just defend their territory, they attacked. Their ships appeared at Imperial outposts and stations, destroying military targets and then moving on. They struck at supply lines and communication nodes, crippling the Empire's ability to coordinate its remaining forces. But what truly surprised the galaxy, what surprised the Empire most of all, was what the humans did when they won. They did not glass the conquered worlds. They did not enslave the populations. They did not build death camps or force the defeated to kneel before new masters. Instead, they helped. On world after world, human ships arrived carrying food and medicine, engineers and doctors. They freed the slaves, rebuilt the infrastructure, taught the conquered peoples how to defend themselves. They offered membership in a new alliance, not an empire, but a partnership of equals. And they apologized. Admiral Rodriguez stood on the surface of Vorth Prime, the first major Imperial world to fall to the human advance. Around him, Vorth civilians watched with confused eyes as human soldiers distributed supplies and treated the wounded, including wounded Imperial soldiers. A Vorth elder approached him, her crystalline body reflecting the light of her world's twin suns. "We do not understand," she said. "You have conquered us. Why do you help us?" Rodriguez looked at her for a long moment before answering. "We have not conquered you," he said. "We have freed you. The Empire conquered you. We are just undoing what they did. But you could take our resources. You could make us work for you. You could do what the Empire did." "Yes," Rodriguez agreed. "We could. We have the power. We have the ships. We have the weapons." He paused. "But that is not who we want to be." The elder studied him with her strange, faceted eyes. "And then who do you want to be?" Rodriguez thought about the question. He thought about human history, the wars and genocides, the cruelty and brutality that had marked their species for millennia. He thought about the long centuries of trying to be better, to control their worst impulses, to choose peace and cooperation over violence and domination. He thought about how hard that work had been and how easily the Empire had undone it. "We want to be the people who could destroy you but choose not to," he said finally. "We want to be the people who have power and use it to help instead of hurt. We spent a very long time learning to be those people. We are not perfect. We still make mistakes. But we try." He looked up at the alien sky, at the stars that were now filled with human ships. "The Empire gave us no choice but to fight. But we can choose how we fight. We can choose what we do with victory. We can choose to be better than the ones we defeated." The Vorth elder was silent for a long time. "The Empire told us that all species are the same," she said at last, "that strength is the only virtue and conquest is the only purpose, that the strong take and the weak suffer." "They were wrong," Rodriguez said. "Yes," the elder agreed slowly. "I am beginning to see that." The human advance continued. World after world fell to the combined human and allied forces. The Empire's remaining fleets were hunted down and destroyed or captured. Imperial governors fled or surrendered. The structure that had held the galaxy in chains for 12,000 years was crumbling. But as the victories mounted, something strange began to happen. The subject species of the Empire, those hundreds of worlds and billions of beings who had lived under Volanthi rule for generations, began to rise up. Rebellions sparked on a dozen planets, then 100, then more. Species that had been too afraid to fight for themselves found courage in the human example. And everywhere, the same message spread. The humans are coming. The humans will free us. The humans will help us build something better. On Earth, Secretary General Chen watched the reports with a mixture of pride and sorrow. Pride in what her species was accomplishing. sorrow for all the death and destruction that had been necessary to accomplish it. Admiral Rodriguez appeared on her screen, his face tired but determined. "The Empire is collapsing faster than we projected," he reported. "Their subject species are revolting everywhere. Their fleets are deserting or surrendering. The High Archon has retreated to the core worlds with what remains of her loyal forces. How long until we reach her? At the current rate? 3 months, maybe less." Chen nodded slowly. "And the casualties?" Rodriguez's expression darkened. "High on both sides. We have lost 47,000 personnel so far. The Empire has lost millions. The subject species have lost even more. The Empire is taking out their anger on anyone they can reach." "We need to end this quickly," Chen said. "Every day this war continues, more people die." "I know. We are moving as fast as we can." He paused and something in his expression changed. "Secretary General, there is something else. Something you should see." He sent her a file, a recording from one of the human ships operating deep in Imperial space. Chen opened it and watched. The recording showed a group of human soldiers entering an Imperial prison facility. The cells were full of beings from a dozen different species: political prisoners, resistance fighters, anyone who had dared to speak against Valanthi rule. Many of them were dying. Many of them were already dead. The humans worked quickly, breaking open cells, treating the wounded, carrying the survivors to safety. One soldier, a young woman with a medic's insignia, stopped beside an elderly alien who was too weak to walk. She knelt down, spoke to him in his own language, and lifted him carefully in her arms. The alien looked at her with eyes that had seen too much suffering. "Why?" he asked weakly. "Why help me? I am nobody." The young medic smiled at him. "Nobody is nobody," she said. "Everyone matters. And that is the whole point." Chen watched the recording end, and she felt tears on her cheeks. This was why they were fighting, not for territory or resources or power, but for moments like this, for the chance to help those who could not help themselves, for the opportunity to prove that strength could be used for kindness instead of cruelty. She thought about the precursor deal again, the promise that humanity would stay in quarantine, would not spread their capacity for violence across the stars. That deal was broken now, shattered by the Empire's arrogance and her own orders. But maybe, just maybe, they could build something better from the ruins. Maybe they could prove that the monster and the healer could live in the same heart. Maybe they could show the galaxy that humanity was more than just the sum of its worst impulses. She wiped her eyes and turned back to her work. The war was not over yet, but the end was in sight. And when it came, Chen was determined that it would be an end worth all the suffering that had come before. The galaxy was watching, and humanity would give them something worth seeing. The war lasted 3 years. 3 years of battles and sieges, of victories and defeats, of hope and despair. 3 years that changed the galaxy forever. By the end, the Valanthi Empire existed only in name. Their fleets were gone, destroyed or captured or surrendered to the human alliance. Their conquered worlds were free, rebuilding with human help. Their great palaces and monuments stood empty. Their officials fled or imprisoned, their power broken beyond repair. High Archon Velith sat alone in her throne room on the Imperial homeworld, or surrounded by the remnants of 12,000 years of glory. The room was dark. The power had failed days ago, and no one had come to repair it. The great crystal windows looked out on a sky filled with human ships, waiting. She had refused to surrender, even as her generals begged her, even as her advisors pleaded, even as the last of her loyal guards abandoned their posts. She had refused. The Valanthi did not surrender. The Valanthi did not kneel to lesser species. But now, sitting alone in the darkness, she finally understood that it did not matter what the Valanthi did or did not do. The galaxy had moved on without them. The empire they had built was dust, and no amount of pride or stubbornness would bring it back. The doors of the throne room opened. A single human walked in. A woman, older now than when she had first appeared on Velith's communication screen 3 years ago. Secretary General Chen moved slowly across the Great Hall, her footsteps echoing in the silence. She carried no weapons. She wore no armor. She came alone. Velith watched her approach with the cold eyes of a being who had lost everything. You have come to gloat, she said, to see the great High Archon brought low. Chen stopped a few meters from the throne. She looked at the ancient Valanthi ruler, and her expression was not triumphant. It was sad. No, she said, I have come to offer you terms. Terms? Velith laughed bitterly. What terms can you offer? You have taken everything, my empire, my fleets, my people. All that remains is this empty room and a broken old female who was too proud to run. You still have your life, Chen said. You still have your homeworld. You still have the chance to rebuild something from the ashes. Velith stared at her. You would let us live? After everything we have done? After the millions we have killed? The species we have enslaved? The worlds we have burned? Yes, Chen said simply. Why? Chen was silent for a moment, gathering her thoughts. Because killing you will not bring back the dead, she said finally. Because revenge will not heal the wounds your empire has caused. Because we have spent 3 years destroying things, and we are tired of destruction. She took a step closer. We are offering you the same terms we have offered every other species we have defeated. War crimes tribunals for those responsible for the worst atrocities, reparations to the peoples you have harmed, a complete and permanent disarmament of your remaining military forces. In exchange, the Valanthi people will be allowed to remain on their homeworld, to rebuild their society, to live in peace. As prisoners, Velith said, as a conquered species, as free beings who have chosen to put down their weapons and join a galaxy that does not want war anymore. Velith laughed again, but there was no humor in it. You think the galaxy will ever be at peace? You think you can change 12,000 years of history with kind words and good intentions? Other empires will rise. Other conquerors will come. And when they do, they will find your precious alliance weak and divided, ripe for conquest. Maybe, Chen admitted, maybe you're right. Maybe peace is just a dream that will never come true. But we have to try. We have to believe that things can be better, that beings can learn from their mistakes, that the cycle of violence can be broken. She looked directly into Velith's 4 cold eyes. We learned that lesson ourselves, you know. Humanity spent most of our history fighting and killing and destroying ourselves. We came very close to extinction more than once. But we survived, and we learned, and we tried to be better. We are not perfect. We still have darkness inside us. You have seen that darkness, felt its power. But we also have light. We have compassion and kindness and love. And we choose to let the light guide us, even when the darkness is calling. Velith was silent for a long time. You are fools, she said at last. But perhaps you are the kind of fools the galaxy needs. She rose from her throne, slowly, painfully, one like a being who had aged centuries in a few short years. She walked to the great window and looked out at the human ships hanging in her sky. I accept your terms, and she said, not because I believe in your foolish dreams of peace, but because my people deserve a chance to survive, even in a galaxy ruled by soft-hearted humans who cannot see the truth of the universe. Chen nodded. Then it is done. The signing ceremony took place 3 days later. Representatives of every species in the new Galactic Alliance gathered in the ruins of the Imperial Palace. Humans stood beside the beings they had fought and the beings they had freed. Former enemies stood beside former slaves. The galaxy, for the first time in recorded history, stood together. Secretary General Chen spoke briefly. She talked about the cost of the war, the millions dead. Now the world's devastated, the suffering that had touched every corner of known space. She talked about the need for healing, for reconciliation, for building something better from the ruins of the old. And then she said something that would be remembered for generations to come. We did not want this war, she said. We did not seek it, did not plan for it, did not welcome it when it came. We spent thousands of years trying to be a peaceful species, trying to control the violence that lives in our hearts. We almost succeeded. She paused, looking out at the assembled representatives. But when the Empire came to our home, when they ignored our warnings and threatened our children, we did what we had to do. We let out the monster we had worked so hard to cage. We became what we had feared becoming. Her voice grew quieter. Arena, now the war is over, and we have won, and we face a choice. We could become the new empire. We have the ships, the weapons, the power to rule this galaxy just as the Valanthi did. We could force every species to kneel before us. We could take whatever we wanted and destroy anyone who stood in our way. She shook her head slowly. But that is not who we want to be. That is not what we fought for. We fought for the right to be left alone, and when that was denied us, we fought for the right of every species to be free. Not free to be ruled by humans instead of Valanthi. Free to choose their own path, their own destiny, their own future. She looked at the human representatives standing among the crowd. And so we are going home. We are returning to Soul's Reach, to Earth, to the quiet life we had before all of this began. And we will dismantle our war fleets. We will return to our farms and our cities and our families. We will try, once again, to be the peaceful species we always wanted to be. A murmur ran through the crowd. Surprise, confusion, disbelief. But, Chen continued, raising her hand, we are not abandoning you. We will trade with any species that wishes to trade. We will share knowledge with any species that wishes to learn. We will help any species that asks for help. And if anyone ever threatens this galaxy again, if anyone ever tries to build another empire of slavery and conquest, we will come back. Her eyes hardened. And they will learn, as the Valanthi learned, why the precursors told the galaxy to let us sleep. She stepped back from the podium. The war is over. The empire is gone. What comes next is up to all of you. Choose wisely. Why choose kindly? Choose peace. The ceremony ended. In the weeks that followed, the human fleets began their long journey home. They stopped at every world they had touched during the war, saying goodbye to the allies they had made and the friends they had found. They left behind advisors and teachers, doctors and engineers, volunteers who had chosen to stay and help rebuild. But the warships returned to Soul's Reach. The weapon platforms were deactivated. The soldiers went back to their families. And once again, humanity retreated behind the invisible border that had protected them for thousands of years. A new beacon was placed at the edge of Soul's Reach. It broadcast a message in every known language, on every frequency, impossible to miss. We come in peace. We mean it. Please do not make us prove the alternative. The galaxy listened. 10 years later, Admiral Rodriguez, retired now, his hair white and his steps slow, stood on a hillside on Earth and watched the sun set over the Pacific Ocean. His grandchildren played in the grass nearby, laughing and shouting in the innocent joy of children who had never known war. A young reporter had come to interview him. She wanted to know about the war, about the battles, about the victory that had freed the galaxy from the Empire's rule. She wanted to know how it felt to be a hero. Rodriguez watched the sunset and thought about her questions. You want to know what I remember most? He said finally. It is not the battles. It is not the victory. It is not the speeches or the ceremonies or the medals. Then what? The reporter asked. Rodriguez smiled sadly. There was a moment near the end of the war. Him we had just freed a planet called Kethvor, a small world, nothing special, just a few million beings living under Imperial occupation. When our ships arrived in orbit, the people came out of their homes and looked up at the sky. They had lived under Valanthi rule for generations. They had never known freedom. They had never imagined that anyone would come to help them. He paused, lost in the memory. One of them, a young female, barely more than a child, managed to get a message to my ship. She wanted to thank us for coming. She wanted to know why we had risked our lives for strangers on a world far from home. His eyes glistened. I did not have a good answer for her. I said something about freedom, about justice, about the belief that every being deserves a chance to live their own life. But the truth is, I do not really know why we did what we did. I just know that when we saw those people suffering, we could not look away. We had to help. It was not a choice. It was just who we are. The reporter was silent, writing in her notebook. The galaxy calls us heroes, Rodriguez continued. They tell stories about the great human warriors who defeated the Empire and freed the stars. But we are not heroes. We are just people who got very good at violence and then spent a very long time trying to be good at something else. He looked at his grandchildren, at their innocent faces and their joyful eyes. The real heroes are them, he said, the next generation, the ones who will grow up in a galaxy at peace, who will never know the darkness we had to embrace. They will have the chance to be better than us, to build things instead of destroy them, to create instead of kill. He stood up slowly, his old bones aching. That is why we fought. That is why we came home. That is why we put down our weapons and returned to our quiet lives. Not because we were tired of war, though we were. Not because we had won, though we had. But because someday, somewhere, there will be humans who never have to let out the monster. Humans who can be kind and gentle and peaceful all the time without ever knowing the cost of that peace. He smiled at the reporter. And that will make everything we did worthwhile. The sun sank below the horizon. Night fell over Earth, over the blue and green world that had been the birthplace of such terrible beauty and beautiful terror. In the darkness, the stars came out, billions of them, stretching across the sky like scattered diamonds. Somewhere among them, a galaxy was learning to live without empires and conquerors. Somewhere among them, species were building new societies and new dreams. And somewhere, in the hearts of every human who looked up at those stars, there was a prayer. Please let there be peace. Please let us never have to fight again. Please let the monster sleep forever. But if it cannot, if something comes that threatens our home and our children and everything we love, then let us be strong enough to face it. Let us be brave enough to win. And let us be wise enough to know when to put down our weapons and go home. The humans had given the galaxy a gift, the knowledge that strength and kindness could live in the same heart, that the capacity for destruction did not have to define a species, in that even the most dangerous beings in the universe could choose to be gentle. It was a gift the galaxy would not forget, and somewhere in the darkness between stars, in the space where warnings hung like ancient prayers, a simple message repeated endlessly. We come in peace. We mean it. And for now at least, that was enough.